Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
Chaka Khan, what started as a fun morning conversation between music legend Chaka Khan and today's own Al Roker turned into one of the most unexpected on-air showdowns in daytime TV history. No one in the studio saw it coming. What began with laughter quickly spiraled into pointed remarks, personal jabs, and a clash that had the audience shifting in their seats. The morning sun spilled into the Today Show studio, casting that bright, cheerful light that always seemed to signal comfort to millions of viewers at home. The camera swept across the smiling faces of the co-hosts before landing on the guest of honor, music legend, the queen of funk herself, Chaka Khan. The crowd erupted with applause as Hoda Kotb leaned forward, her voice bubbling with enthusiasm. Everyone, please give it up for the one and only Chaka Khan. Chaka, radiant in a bold red jacket with curls cascading around her face, lifted a hand and waved. "Good morning, good people," she said, her voice smooth and commanding at once. Al Roker grinned as he shifted in his seat beside her. "Chaka, I have to say, I grew up listening to your music. Tell me something good. I'm every woman. Those songs never get old. But I have to ask, what's it like knowing that your best work is still back there in the past?" The words slipped out casually, as if Al thought he was simply warming the crowd. But the air in the studio shifted almost instantly. The audience gave a small collective gasp, while Hoda's smile froze just a little too tightly. Chaka's eyebrows arched. She tilted her head slowly, a sly smile forming. "Excuse me? Did you just say my best work is behind me?" Al chuckled, trying to soften the blow. No, I just mean you had such an incredible peak. Those songs defined an era. I mean, that was the golden time." Chaka leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "Sweetheart, let me explain something to you. I'm still here. I'm still performing. And when I walk out on stage, those crowds don't act like my time has passed. They act like I never left." The audience broke into cheers, clapping and whistling at her sharp retort. Even Hoda nodded with a laugh, trying to nudge the energy back to fun. "Al, you're not going to win this one," she teased. But Chaka wasn't letting go just yet. She leaned forward, her voice velvet but edged with steel. "See, the problem is, folks love to treat women in this business like we've got an expiration date. Men can go gray and wrinkled, and they're called legends. But when a woman like me keeps working, suddenly she's past her prime." Al raised his hands, chuckling nervously. Whoa, I wasn't saying all that. I just meant people remember you for those iconic records." "Of course they do, because those songs are timeless. But don't confuse timeless with finished." The audience clapped again, some even standing up in support. Savannah Guthrie leaned in, trying to smooth the mood. "I think what Al means is that your music has a place in history. And Chaka, I think we all agree you're still making history today." Chaka smiled at Savannah, gracious but firm. "Thank you, darling. That's exactly right." She turned back toward Al, her eyes narrowing just enough to keep the tension alive. "So next time, maybe phrase it like that." Al laughed, but his eyes darted to the floor for a moment. Fair enough. I'll take that note." The conversation rolled on, but the spark had already been lit. Each question now carried an edge, each answer from Chaka tinged with fire. The studio audience knew they were watching more than a casual morning interview. This wasn't just nostalgia. This was a battle over respect, legacy, and the way women in entertainment are spoken to on live television. As the cameras cut to a commercial break, the crowd buzzed, whispering to one another. Some shook their heads at Al's slip, while others applauded Chaka's quick wit and strength. No one said it out loud yet, but the stage was set for something much bigger than a morning chat. The sparks had been lit, and they were only going to grow hotter. When the cameras returned from the break, the energy in the studio felt noticeably heavier. The audience leaned forward, sensing that the earlier tension between Roker and Chaka Khan hadn't fully cooled down. Hoda tried to steer things into safer waters. "So, Chaka, you've been touring again, and people are saying your voice sounds stronger than ever. What's your secret? How do you keep that power?" Chaka smiled at Hoda, but her eyes flicked briefly toward Al. "The secret? Respecting myself, taking care of my craft, and never letting anyone tell me I'm done." The audience roared with approval, clapping and cheering. Al chuckled, but the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Chaka, I wasn't saying you're done. I mean, come on, I've got nothing but respect for you. I just think it's okay to admit that the music industry isn't the same now. The charts, the sounds, the audiences, they've moved on." That was all it took. Chaka leaned forward in her chair, her expression tightening. "Moved on? Baby, let me tell you something. Good music never moves on. It lives, it breathes. And if you think my audience has gone anywhere, then you clearly haven't been to a show lately." The studio crowd erupted in loud cheers, clapping so hard that even the cameramen struggled to keep steady. Al gestured with his hands, trying to keep it light. "Look, I'm not saying people don't love you. They do. But if we're being honest, the music business is brutal. Younger acts are what dominate now. That's just the truth." Chaka tilted her head, eyes flashing. "Truth or convenience? Because I've seen men older than me pack stadiums without a single person telling them they're past their prime. Mick Jagger is out there running across stages like he's still 20, and everyone calls him unstoppable. But when it's a woman, suddenly the question is whether she should sit down and let the young one shine." The crowd clapped, and a few voices shouted, "That's right," from the back rows. Hoda's and Savannah exchanged quick glances, the kind that said, "This just went deeper than we planned." Al shifted in his chair, his tone tightening now. "Okay, but let's not act like age doesn't matter in the industry. It does. The machine is built around youth. The machine is built around dismissing women after a certain age. Let's call it what it is. And that's not just in music. It's everywhere. Movies, TV, even this show. Women are judged by how young they look, how fresh they seem, while men get to age into authority. That's not a machine, Al. That's bias." The room erupted again, this time with whistles and applause so loud Hoda had to raise her voice. Okay, let's breathe for a second," she said, half laughing, half panicked. But Chaka was just warming up. Her voice carried with that unmistakable command, the same presence that had made her one of the greatest performers alive. "Do you know how many women like me paved the way so young artists could even dream of success? And now, when we're still here, we're supposed to shrink into the background?" I'll lean forward, trying to keep control. "Nobody is saying you should shrink. I'm saying the industry is unfair to everyone, not just women. Younger men get pushed too, trust me. It's not personal, it's business." Chaka shook her head, her tone sharpening. "No, Al, it is personal when people like you sit here on live television and act like I'm some relic from the past. Words matter. How you frame us matters. And whether you admit it or not, women over 40, especially women of color, get erased faster than anyone else." The crowd gasped and then applauded her, some even standing to clap for her. The energy was electric now, the kind of live TV moment no producer could manufacture. Savannah stepped in, her voice calm but deliberate. "Chaka's raising a point here that hits a lot of people at home. Think about it. How many times have we seen women leaders, entertainers, even teachers told that their best years are behind them? It's not just about music, it's about value." Chaka nodded firmly. "Exactly. And let me tell you, I've still got more to say, more to sing, and more to give. If that makes anyone uncomfortable, that's their problem, not mine." The crowd cheered wildly, some even giving her a standing ovation. By the time the cameras cut to another break, the tension was so thick you could feel it in the air. Al tried to sip his water and play it off, but Chaka's fire had already lit the room. The sparks weren't just sparks, they were flames. When the cameras came back from commercial, it was clear no one had cooled down. The studio audience whispered excitedly, some still clapping for Chaka as she adjusted her chair with a queen-like poise. Al Roker gave a tight smile, but his jaw worked as if he were chewing something invisible. Hoda tried to step in, her voice overly cheerful. Okay, so before the break, we got a little passionate about the topic of longevity in the music industry, but let's talk about legacy. Chaka, when you think about what you've built, what makes you proudest? Chaka's gaze softened for a moment. The proudest thing? That I've given generations of people music that heals, uplifts, and empowers. People tell me my songs carried them through divorces, through losses, through life. That's legacy. That's not something you can put an expiration date on. The crowd applauded warmly, some people even shouting, "We love you, Chaka!" from the back. Al nodded but leaned in again. And no one doubts that, Chaka. Nobody does, but you can't deny the reality. Most young people today don't know your music the way their parents did. That's just how culture moves. You might not like hearing it, but it's the truth. The words landed like a slap. The audience murmured, some gasping outright. Chaka's eyes narrowed, and she sat forward, her voice firm but shaking with passion. You think I don't know how culture works? I've lived it for 50 years. I've seen people rise, I've seen them fall. I've seen my own name fade and come back stronger. But don't you dare tell me I don't matter because some teenager hasn't streamed my song this week. Music isn't about charts, it's about impact. The audience erupted, clapping and stomping their feet. Even Whoopi, sitting in the guest row that morning, shook her head and mouthed, "Wow." Al tried to counter, but Chaka wasn't finished. Her voice cracked now, not from weakness, but from raw emotion. You know what hurts, Al? It's not the young people forgetting, it's people like you, people in positions of power on shows like this, acting like we should gracefully disappear once we're no longer shiny and new. That's the knife in the back. That's the betrayal. The room went silent, except for the shuffling of feet and a few murmured mm-hms from the crowd. Chaka's eyes glistened as she continued. Do you know how many women in this country are pushed out of jobs the second they hit 50? How many mothers, grandmothers, and caretakers are told they're too old to contribute? I'm not just speaking for myself. I'm speaking for them. Every woman who's ever been told her time is up when she knows she's got so much left to give. The applause thundered through the studio. Several audience members stood, clapping furiously. Jennifer Hudson, who had been a surprise guest in the wings, was spotted wiping away a tear. Al lifted his hands defensively. Chaka, I'm not saying you don't matter. I'm saying the system isn't fair to anybody who's aging, not just women. That's not me. That's the reality of the business. Chaka leaned forward, locking eyes with him. But when you repeat that reality on air, you're helping keep it alive. You don't challenge it, you normalize it. And that's the difference between me and you. I fight it. You excuse it. The crowd gasped, then erupted in chants of Chaka, Chaka, Chaka. Hoda looked overwhelmed, her hands flapping as if to wave down the storm. But the fire had already spread. Al's voice grew louder, frustration breaking through. So what, Chaka? You want me to pretend the industry is fair? You want me to lie and say there aren't obstacles? Chaka's voice, low and commanding, cut through him like a blade. I don't want you to lie, Al. I want you to believe that we can change it, that women like me aren't done, that seniors in this country, artists, workers, teachers, deserve to be seen, respected, and supported. Because if we accept this as just reality, then we are complicit in burying them alive. The studio exploded. The noise was so intense, producers in the control room had to lower the mics. Some people stood, others shouted, "Amen!" For a moment, Al sat there speechless. His usual smile was gone, replaced by something vulnerable, even rattled. The class wasn't just about music anymore. It was about value, about aging, about who gets to decide when someone's time is up. The emotional flashpoint had landed, and the studio audience knew they were witnessing a cultural moment that would be replayed, dissected, and remembered for years. The air in the studio was heavy, like the moment right before a storm breaks. The audience was buzzing, half on their feet, half clutching their chests at what they'd just witnessed. Chaka Khan had laid bare not just her truth, but the truth of countless others who felt discarded by time and ignored by society. But Al Roker wasn't ready to surrender. He straightened in his chair, his tone sharp, his voice carrying that familiar broadcast cadence, but laced now with steel. Chaka, with all due respect, you can't sit here and accuse me of burying anyone. I've dedicated my career to shining a light on stories that matter. I've been in this industry for decades too, and I know what it means to fight for relevance. So don't stand there and act like I'm the enemy. A hush fell over the crowd. Al's face was flushed, his usually calm demeanor cracking. Chaka leaned back, crossing her arms, her eyes never leaving his. Then why do your words sound exactly like the ones that keep people down? You don't even hear it, Al. You've normalized the disrespect. Al's hand smacked the table. The sound echoed across the studio, startling the audience. Gasps filled the air. You want to talk about disrespect? I've worked every day at 4 in the morning, grinding for this job. I've endured ridicule, health scares, criticism from every corner, and I kept going. Don't tell me I don't understand sacrifice. Don't tell me I don't understand struggle. You think music is the only battlefield? Try live TV for 30 years. The crowd was torn. Some clapped, others booed. The tension was no longer simmering, it was boiling over. Chaka shot forward in her chair, pointing at him, her voice fierce and unyielding. You're talking about your grind? That's you defending yourself, not defending the people who are silenced every single day. You think this is about you, Al? It's not. It's about the system you benefit from. The system that pushes women like me aside while patting men like you on the back. A woman in the audience shouted, "Tell him, Chaka!" and the studio erupted again. Hoda, nervously laughing, tried to mediate. Okay, let's take it down a notch. But the storm wasn't stopping. Al's voice shook with frustration. You think I benefit? You think I haven't faced doors slammed in my face? You think being a black man in this industry has been easy? Don't you dare minimize my fight, Chaka. Don't you dare. The audience gasped. Even Savannah Guthrie's hand flew to her mouth. Chaka paused, the fire in her eyes cooling for just a second. The weight of his words was undeniable, but instead of retreating, she leaned in even harder. I'm not minimizing your fight, Al. I'm saying that when you've clawed your way into the room, you should hold the door open for others instead of echoing the same tired excuses. You know better. That's what makes it hurt more. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Al looked down at his notes, then back at her, his jaw tight, his eyes wet, not with tears, but with raw, unchecked anger. Finally, he shook his head and muttered into the microphone, I'm not doing this. The crowd gasped, murmurs rippling through the audience. Chaka lifted her chin, her voice steady. That's exactly the problem. When the conversation gets too real, people walk away. But I won't. I've never walked away, and I never will. The room exploded with applause, a standing ovation rising like a wave. Al sat frozen, caught between pride and humiliation, while Chaka basked in the glow of the crowd's support. The breaking point had arrived, and the cameras had captured every second.
The studio felt like a battlefield after the storm. The cheers were still echoing as the audience slowly sat back down, buzzing with adrenaline from what they just witnessed. Cameras zoomed in on Chaka, her head held high, her hands folded calmly on the table. She looked every bit the icon who had just turned a morning show segment into a cultural reckoning. Al, on the other hand, sat stiff, his eyes fixed on the desk in front of him. His earlier fire had burned down into embers of frustration. Hoda tried to salvage the energy with a nervous chuckle. Well, that was a conversation, she said, forcing a smile. Savannah nodded quickly, murmuring, "One for the books." Chaka leaned slightly toward the audience, her voice quieter now, but laced with conviction. "I know this got heated, but that's because it matters. This isn't just about me, or Al, or even the entertainment business. It's about how we as a culture treat our elders. It's about whether we value the wisdom of those who've walked before us, or whether we throw them away the moment they don't fit a shiny headline." The crowd applauded warmly, some people standing again. You could feel the weight of her words settle like a blanket over the room. She glanced briefly at Al, then back to the audience. Respect shouldn't have an expiration date. Contribution shouldn't have an age limit. And every time we accept being pushed aside quietly, we make it easier for the next person to be silenced. I won't be quiet, and I hope none of you will either. The audience clapped furiously, some shouting, "Yes!" and "Preach!" Al finally lifted his eyes, visibly struggling to mask the conflict on his face. He nodded stiffly, managing only a few words. "Fair enough." The camera caught the moment. Chaka glowing with righteous fire, Al visibly unsettled. And it was clear this clip would dominate the internet within hours. Backstage chatter began spilling into the studio as the segment wrapped early. Hoda, still smiling nervously, leaned into the camera. "Well, America, we promised you honest conversations on this couch. I think we delivered today. We'll be right back after this." The lights dimmed for commercial, but the energy lingered. In the audience, people whispered to each other, already predicting headlines. "Chaka Khan puts Al Roker in his place." Or, "Today's Show Meltdown, Chaka versus Al." As the credits for the segment rolled, Chaka stood, waving gracefully at the crowd, soaking in the standing ovation that followed her off the stage. And as Al stayed seated, staring into the middle distance, it was clear this clash wasn't just another viral TV moment. It was a cultural mirror, forcing millions to confront uncomfortable truths about age, respect, and the value of those who refuse to be erased.